Emily Sanders, welcome back to the podcast. Super excited to have you back.
Thank you.
Um, Before we get started, I want to let you know a few things. One,
Okay.
I still think your Instagram is top of the line. I still check it all the time. It is super relatable. It is probably the Instagram I have shared most with friends and family because of how relatable your content is. Um, we did an episode, I wrote it down here, 144. So if anybody's listening to this, highly recommend episode 144 between me and you. We did it on shame and guilt.
Mhm.
That was so relatable to me and friends and family for sure. I probably have shared that episode more than any other episode that I can recall, and it's an episode I constantly go back to mentally.
Oh,
That conversation was awesome. Lived up to the hype. I expected big things with conversation between me and you. Lived up to the hype, and you're back again. So I'm really excited for this one. But how's everything going since we spoke? It's been well, almost like 9 to 10 months. Wow,
yeah.
crazy.
Well, first off, thank you so much for the high compliments. That really matters. Being able to plain speak to people
Oh
and
yeah,
just in a way that people can digest info, it matters a lot to me. So thank you for the feedback. On my end, life is good. I'm so sad that summer is done,
I'm
but
happy. I'm okay with that.
are you? All right.
Yes, bring me the fall. Bring me the pumpkins. Bring me the fall. Bring me the cool weather. I'm in. I'm all in. But yeah, for people that are listening to this, your Instagram is what is your Instagram again? I don't want to get that wrong.
Oh, it's emily.sanders.therapy.
People follow this. Follow this. Follow you. Your content is, like you said, it's very digestible. It's relatable. There are God knows how many posts on there. You can just scroll through and it'll take you a millisecond to find one. You're like, oh, yep, this is me, or oh, this is my spouse or my significant other or family member or whatever. And I don't know, it like you said, it's very digestible, it's very relatable. Um, I also think it's a really good way for someone to approach having a conversation with somebody like, hey, have you thought about this? Or hey, I saw this post. What do you think? Um, just amazing stuff.
Thanks. I mean, post can be a good icebreaker
Yeah.
because it's somewhat neutral, right? If you go to your girlfriend or to a friend or a parent or your partner and just say, hey, I stumbled across this. What do you think?
Yep.
You know, you can make me the bad guy. Emily said, not me. I just saw this.
I just happy to see it just popped
So
up.
I don't know.
What do you want me to do? It's the algorithm.
Yeah, it's
But
the algorithm.
first and foremost, I want to introduce you again or reintroduce you. So you're a psychotherapist with a focus on marriage and relationships. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm my licensure is a marriage and family therapist. I definitely see couples and do some family work, but a lot of my work is with individuals. And I feel so passionately that our personal growth would translate into helping us be closer to others. Individual growth is beautiful and it's lovely. And also, a big part of the purpose is to translate into our relationships. There's a
Hmm.
lot of healing that we do in the context of our relationships. There's something unique about being loved by others and loving others well. Um, so, and to be fair, that is one of the markers of effective therapeutic treatment. Yes, it's to cultivate self-awareness and personal insight, and also that our relationships see an improvement as well. So,
Hmm.
yes.
And so I actually just celebrated my 2 year wedding anniversary. I listened to our podcast, 17 or 18. You're way ahead of me as
I'm
far as that
18.
goes.
Sure.
18. So congratulations on 18. Yeah, and I will say I've had decently long relationships in the past, anywhere for 4 or 5 months to 2.5 years as well. But now I'm married and I'm in it, right? You're in it to win it, you're in it to the end. And it's really caused me to kind of take a look in the mirror and have deeper conversations I've ever had in my whole life, because you're going to be communicating with this person literally the rest of your life, and you want it to be as smooth and go as well and be as happy as possible. And
Mhm.
like I said, it it's not just where you are today. You gotta really take a look in the mirror and go back and kind of like look and figure out what's working for you, what's not working well for you. How did you get here? What are things that you can do better? You're never going to be perfect, but how can you get better? And hopefully you're with somebody and your partner feels the same way. And I think that's kind of the solution for a relationship that's going to work. Unfortunately, I am in that situation. We both consistently are looking backwards, like, oh, I know where this came from. Someone so did this when I was younger.
Mhm.
Or we have these conversations all the time, which I think are healthy. But there's a lot that I'm continuing to learn. I'll always learn, I'm sure, about myself and why I act the way I act and why my wife acts the way she acts and everybody that's in a relationship.
Mhm.
Something I really want to touch on today is attachment style. Um,
Sure.
I cannot wait to dive into this with you because I know a little bit of this, but I can't wait to talk to the master. Like I can't wait to learn from you to talk about attachment styles. And I think this is something many of us have heard, but just don't really understand it or know where they fall in this or why it's important. So before I keep rambling on too much, attachment style, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, well, to go backwards, we had John Bowlby, who was a developmental psychologist, and a lot of his research was around the interactions that took place with babies and their mothers, and paying attention to how the mother interacted with their child, and really how did the mother attune, meaning pick up on their baby's needs, and how did they go about meeting those needs? Was that done consistently or not? And so when we're talking about the attachment, you could maybe interchange with bond, right? And so Bowlby was paying attention to how babies who were cared for consistently enough felt secure with their mommies, and babies who were not secure with their mommies, why might that be? And then it's been taken a step further to help us understand, okay, well, we do know that our primary attachment person, sorry, mamas, it is us. It does not have to be us, but biologically speaking, the person that births the child is the attachment figure. We set the stage for how our children go out into the world and attach to other people. So there are four primary attachment styles. The first is obviously a secure attachment. So for these babies, I should take a step back. There was a big experiment that was done where they had mothers take their babies to like a nursery setting and drop their babies off. And so they were wanting to see, how do babies react when they are forced to separate from their mother? What's the process of separating, and what is the process of coming back look like? Secure babies, they cried when their mamas dropped them off, but soon they let the other caregivers comfort them, and they got down to playing eventually. They settled in, and then when mommy came back, they were super happy to see their mother again. So these are mothers who, more often than not, were consistent in meeting and comforting their baby. Now we have anxious babies. So for anxiously attached babies, they noticed that the mama would come and drop their baby off, and the babies would freak out, just absolute sobbing. Your classic picture of like separation anxiety, right?
Mhm.
Not wanting to let mom go when mom would leave. They could not calm down. They would not calm down with the nursery workers that were there. And then when mama came back, rather than being excited to see mom, they started crying again and became clingy. So for anxious babies, their mothers were not as good at being consistent. Sometimes the mother would meet the needs, and sometimes mama wouldn't meet the needs. So there's a pattern of inconsistency. And so because there's no consistent pattern with the care that's being received for the baby, what does that do? It puts the baby on edge, right? Am I going to get help this time or not? Am I going to get comforted this time or not? So those babies are really hard to soothe because they're not really sure what to expect. Then we have avoidantly attached babies, which is where mama would not meet many of the baby's needs, or would meet maybe physical needs, but we're talking about no emotional needs being met. So when these mamas would come and drop their babies off, the babies didn't care. They'd be passed off. They didn't really care that their mom set them down. They didn't care much about the nursery workers. And when mom came back, typically the babies would like turn their heads to see the mom and then just go back to playing. They're very dismissive of the mother because there is no real connection. Those babies have consistently learned, if I need help, I'm not going to get it. Right? Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Oh yeah.
I mean, this pretty obvious stuff, right? And then we have babies with disorganized attachment, and that basically means there's a home where typically there's abuse. So you have babies who are loved, but then also terrorized by their parent. And obviously, you can imagine there's not one strategy, right? There's not let me cling or let me just pretend you don't exist. Babies with a disorganized attachment, they don't know when to come close, when to pull away. It's complicated, right? So that attachment does exist. Again, very common in homes where there's abuse. So you can imagine, as I'm explaining all these relationships with these babies and their mamas, what that can end up looking like in adulthood, because our attachment makeup, we take it from our parent and we trot along and we use it in our romantic relationships. These attachment styles, sure, they can flare up with our friendships or in our professional lives. You can see it kind of bubbling up. But because there's not the intimacy and vulnerability piece like there is when we are trying to connect deeply with someone, that the attachment stuff's not going to play out as intensely there. So we're really wanting to pay attention to how this shows up in our romantic relationships. Obviously, securely attached individuals are pretty confident. I'm going to go out into the world. There are people that I know can help me. There are people out there to love. I know that I will be loved, and they can move about the world somewhat securely, not because they think that they're the shit or that they can solve everything on their own. They move about confidently because they know, if I need help, someone's going to come. I
Mm.
can ask and I'll get the help that I need. People who are anxiously attached typically are real boundary pushers in relationship. It's hard for them to feel at ease. They're always worried if they're going to be left. They're not sure that if I ask for help, oh my goodness, am I going to get it? And so their nervous system's always revving in their relationships because they don't want to lose the relationship. They're wondering, when is this going to go away? And a lot of times people who are anxiously attached feel most anxious when their partner is gone, right?
Hmm.
So when there is distance between themselves and their partner, in that gap, we're not physically close right now. Oh my goodness, what's in the gap between us? Are you going to forget about me? Are you going to return? Are you going to find somebody that you want more? And their mind can really run wild, and it's hard to just settle in. For people who are more avoidantly attached, again, they've learned, mom didn't care about me. When I asked for help, I didn't get it. There's no point in crying because no one's going to come. So when they're in a romantic relationship, they still have a very independent mindset. They're not going to really ask their partners for help. When their partners come close, it's easy for them to feel really overwhelmed and kind of smothered by their partner's presence. They can feel irritated when other people have needs, when their partners have needs, because they're so used to being self-sufficient. It's like, give me some space, right? And then for people who are disorganized, that it can be really hard for them to be close to other people because they have both the, oh my God, don't leave me, and also get the fuck away from me. The relationships are so, it's so intense because they have both the please don't leave me clingy feeling, and then also, oh my goodness, you're overwhelming me, you're smothering me. And also, I've learned that love involves pain and danger. So
Ooh,
you can imagine how deeply complex that is.
wow. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here.
Sorry, I just gave you guys
No, it's
just
amazing. Thank you for setting
lecture.
the table.
And I'm sorry I cussed. I don't know if that's permitted.
Cuss away. I don't care. Okay, so one thing that comes to my mind, just top of my mind, is does this mix and match at all with like love languages when it comes to relationship? Because like I feel like I speak this one language, my partner speak this one language, I have this attachment style, my part like I feel like there's some kind of like an overlap. Is there?
I mean, okay, this is the thing with with love languages. I don't hate it. I love anything that can give people words to explain themselves and their needs. But really, for me, whenever I have somebody that's really hyping my love language is X, Y, or Z, I want to understand what makes that expression of love so important to them. And for many people, it is actually has a lot more to do with what they did not receive growing up. So for someone perhaps that was like very criticized or never received much verbal affirmation, the deep desire to be affirmed verbally is going to be there, right?
Yep.
So love languages is not really, it's not like empirically researched stuff. It's very pop psychology, but there's a point to it. It's lovely.
Gotcha.
Um, Whereas when we're talking about attachment styles, I mean, it's hard that it has translated so much into pop psychology, and also we're talking about research-based stuff
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so another top of mind is today, go figure. Today is the day my son turned 6 months. So we're talking about babies here, and he just started daycare a couple weeks ago. So we are
Okay.
dropping him off. Everything's really good. He's awesome. People love him. He's having a great time there, which makes me feel really good. So when you're talking about babies in this study, like, are we talking about like right now, 6 months? Are we talking down the road? Like, what kind of age group is most impacted?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Attachment is primarily formed within the first 5 years of life.
Okay.
And if you really wanted to break down, human development in all these incremental stages, there are different things that your son's accomplishing in each month and then years of life, right? And especially during the first 5 years of your son's life, you're going to notice that there are seasons when he wants you and mommy more than others, periods where he wants to go and push you away and explore. So you and mom are his secure base,
Mm-hmm.
right? So whether he comes close or whether he wanders, that you are the foundation that he gets to come back to. And it's so sweet. But yes, we're talking from the moment that a child is born, attachment is starting to form, which is why you can have babies who are adopted, even they're taken home day one from the woman who birthed them, and now they're going home with their parent, that they're still going to have attachment wounds,
Mm.
right?
Wow.
So yeah. So children who've been through the foster care system, children who've been adopted, it serves adoptive parents very well to understand and do a lot of research on attachment wounds. How do you earn security? So yeah, but your son, 6 months, you guys are working on it.
That's okay. So here's a question. I'm going to go in chronological order here a little bit. So we're starting young. We're getting older in relationships. So you said I'm working on it. What's the best way I can work on this? Like, what do I need to be aware of as far as like what should I do and perhaps some things that should I not do?
Well, when just a little guy, you're paying attention to his tears, right? That is his flare that he needs something. So when he cries and you change that diaper and then he gets to, goo away, you did it. You did the thing,
Okay,
right?
good, good.
You and your wife's job is to soothe your son when he is upset. And right now, that has a lot to do with physical needs. He's hungry, his diaper's uncomfortable, he's chilly, he's overly tired. You're meeting those needs and you're helping to soothe him. And so when your son gets worked up and his little heart races, but then he gets his milk or he gets, a comforting hug and his heart rate comes down and his breathing slows, you're already at such a tender little age teaching him what it feels like to be soothed.
Okay.
Not born with the ability to self-soothe. We learn the skill of self-regulation and self-soothing by the way we have the outside force come and help us calm down together. What gets tricky is there's a lot of parents that do a pretty great job at physical needs. They can feed their children, they can get them into bed, they can wash them, they can help with homework. They can do all of the physical things. And what starts to get tricky is when our children's needs become more and more emotional. And for parents who have a hard time with their own feelings, a hard time with the feelings of others, this doesn't magically just evolve because now you're a parent and you have the capacity to tolerate your son or daughter's rage or their jealousy or the fact that they hate you right now because you didn't give them what they want and they don't know how to hold love and anger at the same time. And so when you have your especially toddler years, when our children hit especially 3 and 4, they don't want you anymore. You made them angry and they want space or they're frustrated with you. A lot of parents have a hard time during these years because it feels so personal.
Mm, mm,
So when their kid pushes them away, the parent wants to push them away back. And it's hard because parenting really triggers a lot of our attachment wounds and a lot of the gaps in the parenting that we received. So parenting can be so challenging because now we're trying to meet our children's needs while also, oh my goodness, I feel like there's a hole here. So I don't know even how to meet my son or daughter's needs. So yeah, sorry, I'm kind of ranting at
no,
this
no,
point.
no. So what are some
On
parenting
and on about.
I want to
Mhm.
ask the pro here. What are some parenting techniques that you follow or perhaps had to remind yourself in the heat of the moment? Oh, I need to act this way. Is there anything that you would do?
Oh my gosh. Well, we could pick from barrels and barrels of them. I have 3 kids of my own. So my oldest is just about to turn 14, and then I have a 10-year-old, and I have a 5-year-old. So there's lots to pull from. If I'm talking to parents of toddlers, it's to pay attention to when your child needs your physical closeness and when they need your space.
Hmm.
Sometimes when your kids are throwing a fit, when you come close and you pick them up and you hold them because they're upset, you can tell that they start to calm down quickly. Sometimes we come close to our children and we want to pick them up and hold them and they start to yell more because they actually don't want to be held and that's making them frustrated. So
Hmm.
sometimes it can be hard for parents to know, do I come close or do I leave them? And so I tell parents, "Hey, just pick one." And if it's the wrong one, then they'll get louder and oh, do the other thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's just paying attention to your children's cues. So this can be tricky because if you have a parent that struggles a lot with abandonment and their child is crying, then they don't want to leave their kid's side. And they're seeing their kid get really upset. And so now they're wanting to hug their child, even though the kid's saying, please get out of my room or please get away from me. But the parents thinking, oh my gosh, like, I can't leave you. I know what it's like to be left. And I got to stay here. We have to work it out right now. And all of the parents' anxious attachment is starting to flood. I can't leave my child. Does my kid not like me? Are they mad at me? Oh my. And so they'll keep pushing in to come close to their child, even though the kid is asking for space.
Mm.
So, um, yeah, it can be really, really hard. So the more that a parent can learn, how do I manage my own feelings in the face of my child's feelings, they will be able to better attune to their kid. A lot of times we are parenting from our own personal wounds. And quite frankly, that is often not a conscious thing.
Wow. Okay. So I don't want to overstate or understate this. So I'll kind of let you state this. How important is attachment styles and or mixing of attachment styles in the success of relationships? It sounds extremely important, but I
It
don't, it is.
it is extremely important. For me as a therapist, even if I am not explicitly talking about attachment in my sessions, with every single human that I work with, I am always running in the back of my mind. I am paying attention to what is this person's attachment? What are their attachment wounds? What went wrong when they were parented, perhaps, right? Like, I hate using the word wrong, but what did they not get? It's so important for me to be aware of my client's attachment style because I am very aware that that's going to play out between the two of us. If my client never had their needs met, they're hyper independent, they're coming to session, they may be telling me that they are needing help, but when anybody comes close to them, they run away. I have to be aware of that when I'm sitting with them because this is either going to dictate how quickly do I press in, how much space do I give them, how do I go about kind of working my way around helping them not feel flooded so that they can eventually feel safe enough to be with me? And or sometimes I'm like, yeah, this person's probably going to come to 2 sessions of therapy and they're going to be gone.
Hmm.
It just is the truth. For other clients who are anxious, I'm very aware of how that's going to play out between the two of us. What are their fears about what's going to happen between me and them? Are they scared of making me angry? So, all of this plays out in session, and I'm having to be very mindful of it. And it is my job to make sure with clinical judgment, how do I start to bring that into their awareness, right?
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to our romantic relationships, it is a big deal. And in a lot of times, what the most common pairing that I see is you have somebody that's very anxiously attached, coupled up with somebody who is avoidant. And so, as you can imagine, if you have somebody that's very prone to be anxious in their relationships, be very scared of distance, being very worried that they're going to make their partner mad, do you still love me energy, coupled up with somebody who's like, yeah, I care for myself, don't get close to me. You can imagine how that can create a lot of problems in the relationship. And that doesn't mean that the relationship is doomed, by the way. I don't think anybody should be disheartened about their attachment style and I'm destined to be ruined because I read the book and I'm not secure. Oh my gosh, I think my partner's avoidant. I'm ruined. Because I will say, if anybody's spent enough time on social media or reading books, avoidant attachment it has a very bad connotation to it, and that's not cool.
Yeah.
So nobody needs to despair. My hope is that it can help people understand a little bit more about what they're bringing into their relationship and what could potentially be triggers for them. And how do we talk about this in a way that can help both parties feel safe? Because ultimately, what it comes down to when we're talking about attachment styles, we're talking about safety. And a lot of people, in the love bubble, the first few months of dating, everything is blissful because reality hasn't really set in and there's been no point of contention yet, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that the love bubble's invalid. I hope everybody just really savors their little love bubble, but eventually it has to pop. And as you're starting to work closer to being more vulnerable and more intimate with each other, anxiety can go up, right? There's fear
Mm-hmm.
of loss there, fear of loss of love, loss of autonomy. Who am I? What if this person hurts me? Actually, this person makes me angry, but I'm too scared to bring it up because what if they leave me? Or I feel like I really want a guy's night. I really want to get away from my girlfriend, but that's going to make her spiral. And what if she thinks I'm cheating just because I want to go out and play pickup basketball with the guys? So, attachment has a lot to do about the angst in our relationships.
Oh yeah. It sounds like it has almost everything to do with it.
It
Um,
I mean,
Use
it
it
does.
does. Yeah.
It really does. Yes. It has a lot to do with it.
Why didn't they teach this in school? Shit. I mean, my life would have been easier knowing this when I was much younger, to have more self-awareness in my relationships. But what
Well,
the hell?
and the sad thing about self-awareness, we can only be aware when we're ready to be aware.
I guess so.
No one can force awareness on us,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I remember you
the
saying that in our first episode. You mentioned anxious and avoidant are a common pairing.
very common.
Is
Yes.
that the most common pairing there is, or is that the most common pairing you see in therapy? How does
Uh,
that work?
I would dare say is just period. Yeah. And
Interesting.
then, of course, yes, this is the most common pairing and I would say for most couples.
Okay.
Uh, Two anxious or two avoidantly attached people, because they are so hyper independent, those couples actually are most likely to divorce, just because they're already so wired to do things on their own that they're not arguing. And while arguing isn't great, there is something to be said about conflict and how it can make us in our anger run towards each other to want to create change or to be understood or to labor over fixing things. The conflict is very, very, very good for relationships when it's handled well. But if you're not even wired to like, what's the point? Too much work. I don't, it was easier when I was yeah, it was easier when I was single. You can see where if
Yeah.
neither party really has any drive to be close, there's not going to be heavy investment in making the relationship work. Two anxiously attached people that end up being wildly codependent, and you can have couples who just they don't want to be apart from each other. Nobody wants to be away from each other. And there's some positives to that. There's negatives too,
Yeah.
right? There's tension points, but they're joined at the hip.
So can I assume two secure people, couples, whatever, is best setup for success, if you will?
Totally.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that everybody else is doomed, because what's so important as we get older and we're in our relationships is to understand the concept of earned security, meaning over time, the more that my partner does their best to show up for me, to be sensitive to me, to be compassionate with my flaws, that we've had some really big arguments and we've made it through together, as trust is built, we start to earn security and earn a secure attachment with our spouse or our partner, or whatever you want to call them. So I don't want people to just be thrown into despair that, oh my goodness, I was from an abused relationship, so there's no hope, or I was from an abused home, there's no hope for me. Or, oh yeah, I'm that anxious person Emily's talking about, like I can't stand being away from my partner, I'm so scared all the time. Like, there's totally hope. So,
Is the goal, let's just say someone's in one of those styles that they don't want to be in, is the hope to make it the best they can in that style, or is the hope to possibly evolve to a secure? Can you evolve to a secure person, if you will, if that makes sense?
yeah, I think that that's okay to say that. I think you're basically talking to and speaking to what earned security is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's having a respect for the fact that a lot of the woundings, we often call them in therapy speak, which I try to avoid, but ruptures to the attachment, they're gonna leave their mark, right? They're gonna leave their mark, but over time the scar gets littler and littler and littler and littler, and that's the point of therapy, right? We're trying to create new neural pathways. So we're trying to create new ways of being, and of course we're able to do that.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
When couples come to you, and they're seeking your help, are you trying to help them with their own attachment style from their own like roots, or are you trying to help them with their attachment style when it compares to the other person? Is it like, so as long as they're with this person, you're going to help them with that bond, not necessarily go back in their own time and fix themselves. If that makes sense, and it was kind of a
Oh, it
complex
does make
question.
sense. I want to do both, actually. So, for my approach with therapy, a lot of times I will treat couple sessions. I will commonly do almost like individual work in front of the partner.
Okay.
And because I do want each person to understand and create empathy for what their partner has been through. And it's actually really lovely to watch, let's say, a husband say, "Oh my goodness, I sound like my wife's dad.
Mm,
Oh, oh, I'm just realizing that I make my wife feel X when I do dot, dot, dot. That's kind of what I do." And it's really lovely to see, you know, a partnership where people are realizing, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know I was doing it, but I have been punching on an old wound, haven't I?"
mm,
And I don't want it to be like that. "Oh, I didn't want to make you feel like that. Oh, your mother never listened to you. And here I'm not listening to you. Oh, heavens, I'm sorry." And so it's sweet to watch somebody be aware of the way that they hit old wounds. And they weren't trying to do that. It's no spouse's fault to realize they're hurting their partner in the way that their mother did or their dad did. Like that's not their responsibility to tidy up. And also, when we say, "Hey, I hate that you went through that, and I'm realizing I make you feel that way too. I don't want that. I want to give you a different experience." There's a lot of healing that comes.
it's
So it's
powerful.
yeah, it's not our job to fix our partners. We can't. We literally cannot fix our partners, and at the same time, we can create an environment where they can grow and flourish if they want to.
Yep.
So,
And
um,
admittedly, I've I admitted on the last podcast, Kristen, my wife and I will go to couples counseling, like one of those things where take care of issues before it comes an issue. Also work through communication, stuff like that. I also occasionally will go on my own solo therapy sessions. I invite her to almost every one of them because it's like sometimes you need almost someone else to point out something and how it like irritates me or why it irritates me or why I act the way that I act. And if she acknowledges it or knows it, coming from like the therapist, what a world of difference, because then it's like, oh, I get why you act that way now. I get why that might irk you or why you might, get a little annoyed or frustrated when I say or do these things. I think there's a lot of power in that because it's like here someone's been doing it this whole time, not even realizing, something so innocent to them is hurtful to the other person. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I think you kind of did. But yeah, I invite her. I'm like, yeah, just come on. Like, it's only going to help you knowing me and my background and why I act the way I act is only going to make us better. That's my opinion for sure.
I mean, it really does. It helps. Um, I mean, I'd be happy to share my experience when my husband and I went to couples therapy the first time. It was because we had it became an explosive argument. Like, if I think top five arguments that we've had, this was one in the top five. And it was about when to start having children. And my husband at the time really wanted to have a baby soon. And I most certainly did not. And the argument became so wildly heated that I remember feeling confused and crazy. Like, why is this such a big deal? We were both just completely dysregulated. And at that point, I had already started working on my master's. So thankfully, I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, I think this is a clue of something. And so we went to couples therapy, and lo and behold, of course, we come to realize it's the argument is not really about the baby. A lot of our attachment wounds were being hit on. And so, to make a long story short, ultimately, me saying, "No, I don't want to have children right now," it felt very rejecting to my husband. He had a lot of trauma in his past. He was scared, like, was I going to leave him? Why doesn't Emily want children? It really triggered his
Mhm.
anxiousness. full stop. And then for me, coming from my background where I always felt very engulfed by people, I never got to make my own decisions, feeling like my agency was being taken away. It felt like my husband was getting too close and I wanted to run.
Mm.
Right. And so when all of a sudden we realized this conversation around having children, it's not about the baby, right? It's about having agency taken away. It's about the fear of being left. And when we're able to sit down and talk about those emotional dynamics, the conversation completely changes. As a couples therapist, I'm very disinterested in solving people's fights. Like, I don't care. I don't care how they structure their day. I don't care how they spend their money. I do not. All of the things that couples come in with, in my mind, are like a red herring. It's a distraction. I don't want to sit and talk about why someone did or didn't unload the dishwasher. Okay, well, we can make a chart for that. Like, I don't.
I love this.
For me, it's just, can we please talk about what is actually going on? And there's heavy emotion in the things that couples argue about. And
Mm.
again, it all comes down to safety and getting our needs met. And how do we feel calm and regulated? And I hate to say it, it often comes back to attachment.
I'm so happy that we're talking about this because of the weight and the importance of attachment styles in people's relationship. Wow, okay, I didn't realize it was this big. I knew it was important. I don't think I realized it was like a huge root cause of a lot of issues. Thank you for sharing what you shared. I mean, anybody who's in a relationship or has been in a relationship can clearly relate to something like that, if not exactly the issue that you were talking about. So when you went to a therapist, was it hit on like pretty quickly, or did you have to kind of like deep dive? Did it take a while, or how did that resolve?
No, it didn't. I mean, every because we went in for this particular conversation and it's not like we're trying to decide, are we going to save this marriage or not? Right? It's
Hmm.
there wasn't some long buildup of damage that had been done to our marriage. I think we did couples therapy for like 4 or 5 months, and that was because we found the value in it.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately we ended up seeing our own therapist, and that's been obviously lovely doing our own work. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but
That's
what's challenging for me is a lot of times couples way, way, way too long to come to couples therapy. And so when we're talking about a decade or two of accumulated resentment and hurt and frustration, and we have years of being misunderstood and not feeling seen, couples therapy takes a lot longer in those settings because sometimes people are just so pissed with each other that the idea of having compassion for their partner's stories, screw that.
yeah.
They don't want that. Or you have somebody who's been begging for years, please, something's not right. Please, can we get help? And the other person's dismissive until the partner says, well, that's it. I want a divorce. Oh, no. Oh, no. It is that bad. I didn't know. So then this couple comes to therapy, and the partners that's been begging for change is over it. They're already out.
Hmm.
To try and get the partner to buy back in, it's hard. Or you have couples that they want to come in and do one session and leave all better. So anybody who's considering couples therapy needs to really think realistically, what are you going in for? What's your expectation of what's going to happen? And then I will say it's also challenging because to find a good couples therapist can be really hard. It can. So, and
Everything you said in the last 2 minutes is like hitting really close to home for me. Like everything that you said. That's
and
yeah,
if I
it's hard. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, just I would say to anybody who's listening and they're thinking, oh, well, I thought about couples therapy. Where do I even start?
Mm.
I would encourage somebody to look for an emotionally focused therapist. I'll say that again, an emotionally focused couples therapist, because that therapist has been trained to do what I was describing earlier, which is yes, let's try to build empathy for our partner and let's make sense of how the attachment dynamics are flaring up in the relationship. So, um, and that form of couples treatment does have the highest efficacy rates. I mean, if we're looking at, research-based stuffs.
Great to know.
Yeah,
That
also
is
Gottman, anybody that's been trained to use Gottman methods, that's also great too. So sometimes I know it can be hard to know what am I even looking for. So please, you call a therapist, get a phone consultation, say, talk to me. How do you work with couples? This is what's going on in my marriage or my relationship. How would you treat us? Ask your questions. And if something doesn't feel right or it feels imbalanced, like move on, try somebody else. So that's
amazing. That's super valuable advice, especially to me right now, because our marriage counselor is now a new mom and she's got twins and we're not really gonna be seeing her anymore. So we literally have to find somebody else if you want to keep doing this. So here's a question I actually had. I wasn't planning on asking you this, but you said you and your husband started to do your own work.
Mhm.
Is there a benefit that I see someone completely different than my wife? Or is there a benefit that we kind of see the same person separately and then occasionally we come together with that same therapist because they have an idea of who we are outside of the couple?
I mean, there's any number of ways to do this. I mean, it's somewhat frowned upon in our profession to have a therapist treat two partners individually.
Is it?
And also
Okay.
at the same time, it's there are a lot of therapists that do it. So if the therapist is really good at being able to compartmentalize and not let any kind of bias bleed in, that they have really good boundaries, that they're maintaining the privacy of both husband and wife or partner and partner, then that's totally fine. But it's also okay to see two separate therapists as well. Sometimes you can ask your therapist to consult with your partner's therapist. Both partners have to agree to let their therapists speak.
Gotcha.
I don't think there's any one right way to do it. There's just how are you going to choose to go about it and what are the perks and what are the downsides. So I have treated partners individually, and there are some instances where that is extremely inappropriate and I will not do it. So it really does matter the couple and some of the issues that they're coming in for. So,
Interesting. Okay. I did not know it was frowned upon because I thought there may be like a slight benefit, like, oh, this person knows me as an individual. So she's going to have a better idea what I can bring to the relationship. So that's really interesting. So knowing that we have to find a new one, let me go find two more.
sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And, I guess, as an individual therapist, our job is to focus on you
hmm,
and the way you see the world and the way you see your marriage. And sometimes the danger of having your therapist work with also your partner is that that actually can kind of taint the way that they start to sit with you now, because now they're letting outside influences break the frame of your personal individual work.
hmm,
And yeah, every client, everyone I work with has their fixed way of seeing the world. Do I understand that their reality may not be the full reality? Of course I do. And yet it is still my job to dive into the individual's reality and make sense of it with them and see what needs to be shifted. So sometimes it's not always helpful to have reality
hmm.
in the room. So for whatever that matters, and every therapist has a different, you know, model that they kind of hold to. So
You're the
anyway.
best. You are absolute best. How much longer do I have you for? I don't have to respect your time.
Oh, thank you. Let me see what the time. You got me for like 15 more minutes.
15 more. I'm going to take up all 15.
Okay.
Okay. So one thing we've kind of discussed here more recently is arguing. Um, what is a more proper way to argue? Because like you said, conflict is it's great. It's great for a relationship. You need
It
conflicts. If you don't, something's going on there. So what is the proper way to argue so it can actually be purposeful?
Well, the hard part is that most people end up falling into an argument on accident right? It'd be one thing if we are going to sit down and approach a hard conversation knowing this is what we're going to talk about versus, oops, I'm pissed at you. I feel surprised by the fact that I'm angry and now we're fighting, right?
Hmm.
So I think it is important for couples, if you find that you are arguing and you are getting more and more upset, you may be past the point of doing anything productive. So I think it's important for some people that have a hard time knowing their feelings. Then I would say, hey, pay attention to your body. Are you clenching your fist? Are you gritting your teeth? Is your chest beating harder? Are you getting really hot? Is it getting hard for you to figure out your words? You probably need to stop, because if you're so dysregulated, now you're in a place where you're just trying to survive this conversation and nothing meaningful is going to be done. So couples need to know when they got to call a timeout. When do we have to take a break because we're not doing anything here? And in fact, we might be in danger of hurting each other the more
Mm.
upset or desperate we get. We do not do anything good when we're in desperate places. And if we're talking about attachment, since this is what you started out the time asking me about, this is really important too, because for the person who is anxiously attached, stopping fighting feels really dangerous. Because again, if the space and you leaving me is what threatens me, then to stop fighting is gonna feel really dangerous.
Mm.
So if the person who is more avoidant or secure or whatever can just say, hey, we got to call a timeout. I'm getting too upset to talk. Can we please finish it after the kids go to bed? I'm going to walk around the block. I have to head to work. Can we do this while we're making dinner? Call a time out, but it is a great act of love to tell your partner when you are going to finish the conversation. Because what happens a lot of times is people who are more avoidant, they don't want to keep talking. And so if it's like, you can't just pull the card of, I need a break of talking from talking about this and never go back to it. That's dirty. That's
Mm.
cheating. That's
Mm.
not an actual break. That's
Mm.
you avoiding and throwing things, sweeping everything under the rug. If a couple has to call a timeout, please take it. And also, you have to talk about when you're going to come back to revisit the conversation. Hey, I'm getting too worked up. I can't keep talking about this right now. I'm going to take a walk. Let's come back in an hour. Hey, let's
What
meet up.
here's a question.
Yeah.
What's the partner supposed to say to that, knowing that someone's going to leave the conversation and literally go walk away? I've
Mhm.
been in that boat and it's pissed me off sometimes. Like, no, I'm not done yet. So, like, someone who's in the opposite shoes, listening to someone say, I'm going to step away,
Mhm.
how should that person feel when that's said to them?
Well, I'm not going to tell them how they should feel, but I would say it's their act of love to let their partner calm down.
Thank you for
That
saying
is
that.
their act of love to manage their own anxiety. And now this is where we're talking about earned security. You said you're going to come back to keep talking about this. I'm going to trust you're going to come back to me.
Mm.
And sometimes for the anxious person, it's all that they can do to survive that 30 minutes to wait till the conversation starts,
Mm.
right? I
Mm.
understand it's very hard. It sounds great in theory. Oh, so yeah, it sounds simple. But it can be really, really hard, especially when some of your attachment stuff or the threat to the relationship feels so, so intense.
I have another question for you when it comes to that, though. So, what happens if your partner steps away for 30 to 60 minutes and you're just sitting there boiling and you're just thinking of more stuff to throw on the fire when they come back? Like, because that'll happen to me too. So, like, what would you say to me in that instance?
What I would tell you is that sounds like that's where your work is. This is what you need to take to your therapist.
Hmm.
What's happening for me that I can't calm down when we're taking a break? Why is it that I'm getting more and more angry? Well, shoot, if I know anger is a secondary feeling, then what other shit am I feeling?
Hmm.
How can I actually make myself feel safe? What's happening to me there? Because there's old stuff. If that's happening to you, like with peace and love, you're hitting a nerve, and that is for you. to care for
Mm.
as an act of love to your wife is to figure out what's happening. And that's really, and it is hard. It is scary to sit there and just feel like I'm being flooded while you get to go skip away.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? But it's you are having to keep in mind that there's a good chance that how angry and worked up you're getting in the distance is how angry and worked up they're getting face to face.
Ooh, okay. Well,
Right?
you're good.
So,
You're good.
well, this, 'cause again, this is like where it's hard. When two people are getting intensely triggered at the same time, these are the hardest arguments.
Mm,
When we got nobody to hold down the fort and be like, hey, we're on the same team. I love you. Hey, it's okay. We're gonna figure it out. If it's great if you can have somebody that is emotionally online to say, hey, dude, same team.
mm.
Hey, we're not going anywhere. I love you. Why is this getting so hot right now? That's great if you got an anchor. But if two people are completely untethered, that's a hard, painful place to be because now
Yeah.
nobody's there for the other.
I would say like the nice thing about at least my marriage, probably a lot of marriages, is that you kind of almost learn how to argue with the person. Like there's definitely been moments where it's like same team. Like I've said that before, just to kind of like try to diffuse the
Totally.
situation.
Yep.
But there are, like I said, there are moments where it's like sometimes that time apart is just time for me to think and then go down the rabbit hole and then think of more ammunition for when she comes back. And that's a dangerous scenario there too. So I don't know. Like you said, you have to argue. You're two different human beings. You see the world differently. Attachment styles obviously play a huge role in why things might cut you or cut deeper than someone intended. And it's just super, super valuable information. And as
And
far as
I would
no,
just say too, the ultimate security is understanding that even if we get mad at each other, nobody's going
yeah,
anywhere.
that's huge because when people start off in a relationship, they're afraid to get into that first argument or maybe that second argument or the big one, knowing that like this might be the one to end it. And then it doesn't really get to where it needs to go. You don't say the things you need to say because you're afraid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Safety to get angry. And that means, yeah, okay, I'm safe, meaning I know we're not going to get a divorce,
yep.
but also safety in terms of I know that my partner's not going to be cruel to me.
Mm,
I'm not going to be belittled. I'm not going to get upset and be recorded. I'm not, I don't have to be scared that I'm gonna get hit. I mean, we're
mm,
talking about fear in all different kinds of ways, right? But
mm,
just fundamentally, I know that whatever I say is not gonna get used against me later. I'm not gonna be made fun of. I'm not gonna be told to shut up. I'm not gonna get silent treatment. Like if I try to talk about something hard, now I'm not gonna get to talk to my wife for 6 days, you know. So there's a lot of different layers to emotional safety, but there should be safety to disagree.
and a lot of that comes back to attachment styles. It's crazy. I'm so happy we did talk about this. I know I don't have so much more time. When it comes to arguments, is there a phrase or wording or anything when you know what you're going to say is probably going to start something, but you want to kind of like ease into it, or perhaps you can soften it a little bit? Because, like, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. That one of them comes to my mind is like, you might hate this, but, or sorry to bring the bad news, or whatever. Like, people say these common phrases, but I don't think they do any good. Is there any kind of like phrase or any way you would soften getting into an argument that would be helpful?
I think it's okay to say something like, hey, I have something hard I want to talk to you about. Is this a good time? Or would you rather wait till after work? And I actually think on that note, it's helpful to say about what too, because again, for people who are more anxious, to just have like this big looming conversation
That's
feels really
me.
right. Like,
What is it? What is it?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, hey, I really want to talk about our budget. Do you
Yeah.
have the space to do that right now? Or, hey, I want to let you know that I've been feeling lonely a lot lately. I really miss you. Can we talk about spending some time together?
Mm,
Being direct is always good.
mm,
And at the same time, understanding that honesty without compassion is just a sword. So it is important, yes, to speak our truth and be mindful of how we do that. So you can, hey, we said that we were going to talk about scheduling sex and we haven't done that yet. Is that something that we can sit and do right now? Um, so
It's amazing, at least to me personally, probably to many people, it's amazing how much an approach like that can just you can have the disagreement and then move on.
mm,
Or if the approach is bad, it's going to start another argument based on the approach, let alone the whole thing you want to argue about. And then just everything goes into a tailspin, right?
Yeah, it can be really hard. So if you're trying to revisit a conversation, just saying, "Hey, I know every time we talk about our budget, we get pretty crazy with each other. How do we not like can we do a safe word? Like if we start getting too upset, can we pineapple it or I don't know, right? And also sometimes when there's really hard stuff we have to talk about, it may not all get resolved in one setting, and that's also okay.
Mm.
So, hey, let's set aside 20 minutes. Let's hit the budget convo hard. When the timer goes off, we got to stop and then we'll pick it up on Thursday night. If you just have to do it in little bits and, digest it, fine. I also think it's important for couples to assume positive intent. If if you can understand that when we're arguing, we are typically fighting to be seen or to be understood, or we're doing what we think is in the best interest of the relationship, that does help. And I know some people who are listening are probably like, yeah, but my partner's selfish. It's like, okay, maybe I don't know. But if you understand you're fighting and it's usually, okay, some part of my husband or wife they've gotten triggered, like, "Hey, what's going on? You're getting really upset and I don't understand why. Can you
Mm.
help me understand why this part's so tough for you?" And they may not be able to say it, and that's okay, but it's at least a very soothing thing to say, "I think something more is going on."
It plants a seed too to let them kind of think about it, marinate a little bit too, you know? That's super helpful. Um, you have to go in a couple minutes, but I want to wrap this up with attachment style and a selfish question for me, speaking of selfish. So back to where we started, you said this all starts with moms. I'm
Yeah.
a new dad.
Mhm.
So what can I do for my son to create a positive attachment style?
You do all the things that a mama would too,
Yeah.
right? It's not just because all the weight is on a mama that dads don't matter, because good heavens, you most certainly do. And you're the one that's also contributing to your son's feeling of safety as well. That when he has big feelings, that you're showing up for them, that you're caring for his needs. And the lovely thing is that you and your wife probably have different strengths and
Mm.
different emotional capacity for different conversations, and how nice that you guys can teamwork it so that your son can be in a home where he feels seen and understood. And
Very much. We're learning a lot and we're doing it on very little sleep. I don't know if he's teething now or what. The sleep the last few days has been non-existent. So I might be
sorry,
messaging you how the hell to get through this.
I've blocked all that out, man. No.
Coffee, coffee, coffee,
Yeah.
coffee, power naps, coffee. Yeah, that's what it's been. Um, anyway, this has been super enlightening. Like I said, I knew into attachment style, super important. I'm really glad we dove into that. I did not realize how heavy this was in a relationship. So hopefully we open some eyes here and that people can be a little self-reflective and take a look and look at their attachment style and how they can progress and how can they be self-aware and aware of their partners. And I think you said there's hope for everybody, right? Just because there's I don't know what people might consider oil and water, you can still make it work, right?
Absolutely. Of
Great.
course. And side note, there's a lot of great books on attachment parenting. So I know you keep asking, what do I do? What do I do? But truly, you doing your own personal work
Mhm.
around your own emotional regulation will go so far in you being able to parent well, because that is, again, the hardest part. How do I keep myself calm in the face of my child who is very much not calm?
Mm.
We want your son to be able to come and bring his anxiety or his fear or his jealousy or his frustration to you and get some of your calm. There's supposed to be the emotional exchange that he brings his icky, hard to hold feelings to you and he gets to walk away with your calm. Well, what is your son supposed to do when you have none? You have no calm to give him. So the more that you can work on managing your own feelings, this will go so much farther than any book that you could read, any technique that you could do is your calm presence for your child. So
The best. You speak it as well as you write it on your Instagram. It's so relatable. I love it. Before I let you go, where can people find you and follow you?
yeah, I mean, you can find me on Instagram, emily.sanders.therapy. I'm on Facebook. I don't know what my name is there. I'm on Thread. I don't know. You could Google me.
You're the best. Like I said, this is our second episode. Episode 144 is our first one. So if you enjoyed this episode, go back to listen to that because that was a classic. And if I'm fortunate, you'll come back on again in the future. We'll keep diving into stuff because, like I said, you are the absolute best. So thank you again, Emily.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you.
Bye.